Manually downloading CSV. Oh, also CSV. So did you? I think that's priority. Oh, we have to build it. My priority. Awesome. Oh yeah, and when I say mom, I'm just thinking because. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get to it. All right, I want to show you something. On Monday, we talked about guidance, player guidance, this idea that as game designers, we're really trying to teach people things. How do you teach people things in a fast, elegant way that doesn't involve dumping a bunch of text on them, that doesn't force them to just go read the manual? Well, has anyone played a series or heard of a series called Mario Party? Okay, a very well-known series, famous for its particular structure, okay? Player guidance is the topic we care about right now, and what we're going to find is that Mario Party is very uniquely good in a very challenging situation when it comes to player guidance, okay? Do you remember from Monday, what are the traits of a good tutorial? What kind of things are we generally looking for in a tutorial when we're trying to teach people things? Yeah. Yeah, right? Examples, right? Okay, you want to avoid tons of text. You don't want to drop things on them, okay, out of time, okay? If you open up your game and this is the first things people see, is you're going to lose a lot of points on P1, P2, and P3, okay? Way too much text, okay? People do not want to read a novel about things they don't care about yet when they are trying to get into a game, okay? Remember, no one is going to read your manual, all right? This is one of the reasons that in course design, you can't just create big specs and expect people to immediately read them all and remember everything, okay? You have to keep reminding them, and you need to find other ways of verification as well. Traits of a good tutorial include being informative, right? You want to help people understand what mechanics matter, what are their long-term goals, what are their short-term goals, what kind of actors and mechanics and setting do they have access to. You want to be very time efficient, okay? You want to show, don't tell, okay? Very common tip when you're writing an essay, right? And you want your advice to be just in time. You want to provide information that's relevant at the exact moment it is useful, not too early, okay? Otherwise, it's useless in one ear and out the other, but not too late. Otherwise, it doesn't arrive in time to be impactful, okay? Another interesting thing about the Mario Party series is that you want your tutorials to be multiplayer robust, okay? On your P2 or P3 project, when you're making maybe a multiplayer game, you can decide if you want to be single player or multiplayer. You might decide to make a multiplayer game. So how are you going to teach multiple players at the same time who might have different skill levels or knowledges of your experience, okay? For Kya, which we talked about on Monday, a single-player game, it had a lot of great things that it did to teach players, okay? But one of your challenges is that you're going to have a very different environment when you go to that final showcase, okay? How are you going to teach people possibly a multiplayer game in a very, very, very noisy and distracting environment, okay? It's a lot harder to teach people when it's not a lecture hall you're teaching in. It is a big, busy expo hall full of noise, okay? This is the kind of challenge that the company Hudson Soft, right, and now known as ND Cube, did, okay, with their Mario Party series. Mario Party is a very long-running series, and if you don't know what Mario Party is, if you haven't played it or haven't seen it in a while, it is basically a board game that has hundreds and hundreds of mini-games, okay? These mini-games are usually very short. There can be up to 60 or 70 mini-games, new mini-games, in every new Mario Party game. And somehow, Nintendo has to figure out how they're going to teach people how to play all of these games. Because you typically play one game for just a few minutes, and then you don't play that game again for hours, if that, okay? So we've got one chance to teach people how to play these mini-games. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you footage of a mini-game, okay? And I want you to pay very close attention to it. I want you to pay attention to how does the game try and teach you when it's just a couple seconds, okay? Let's go ahead and watch. Okay, what did you notice? Using what you learned on Monday, what did you notice? Yes?
At the very beginning, he blows a flame and then they all kind of move to the side so that
Excellent. Yes. At the beginning, Bowser blows a flame and your characters in a cutscene, right? You're not controlling them at that point. They all use their main mechanic. They run out of the way, okay? They dodge, okay? What else? Did you notice anything else? Yes?
They have many lives.
Okay.
Like when they fail, they continue murdering.
Okay, yep, that's a good part of it, right? Okay, so there are a couple things happening here, and they're happening very, very fast. This is the opening shot of the cutscene. In film theory, film studies, I believe this is called the establishing shot. Most films, when you go to a new scene, often when you begin the film, it will actually begin with a very high up angle, and its objective is to help you understand the setting of the scene that's about to happen, okay? This is important in games as well because it gives you information about what your play area is, okay? We will be doing things in this kind of small rectangle. By the way, does this environment have any particular vibe or tone to you? Is this going to be a happy-go-lucky minigame where you're collecting coins with your best friends?
It feels dangerous.
It feels dangerous, right? Absolutely, right? There is darkness, there is smoke, there is fire and brimstone around the arena, okay? There's a very warm, kind of red-hot color palette in use. You are standing on a gigantic logo with fangs, okay, and an evil smile. Right? So this immediately sets the proper mood, atmosphere, vibe, okay? You're going to be doing something a little bit frantic in this minigame, okay? And just a moment later, a character appears, a new character appears, all right? But Bowser doesn't just kind of walk in, right? Wave his hands, say hello, how's it going, right? He appears in a very fearsome manner. He falls from the sky. And when he reaches the ground, the screen shakes. Your characters that are meant to represent you in the game world freak out, okay? They respond in a very fearful way. They're trying to model the behavior they want to see in you, okay? And so, what happens next? Well, Bowser shows off one of his mechanics. In fact, his main mechanic in this minigame is a fireball that he can aim and send at you at any time. Okay? Your characters then demonstrate your main mechanic. What is it? You can actually run out of the way, okay? Thus, right, you've learned quite a bit in a very small amount of time about what your objectives are and what you can do, okay? What is this called? Does anyone know what this is right here? You see this often in multiplayer games. How do you get past this screen? Does anyone know? Yes?
Every controller.
Exactly. This is a screen that will not proceed. It will delay and delay and delay the game until every player who's involved with the game presses a button. Okay? This is called the ready up screen, and its purpose is to synchronize every player before something begins. This also means that if even a single player is confused about what to do, then they can halt the game and demand an explanation from their friends before they get permission to start. Okay? Why would this be valuable in a multiplayer party game? The kind of games that get played in noisy, distracting environments. You don't see this in slow single-player games, okay? But ready-up screens are all over the place in multiplayer games, especially party games. Why would this be here? Yeah.
Yes, one reason could be if people are switching out like players.
Exactly. Yeah. Parties are busy. They're distracting. Crazy things are happening. Suddenly, someone has to get up and go do something. You hand the control to someone else. Maybe they missed the intro, okay? It's not too hard. And so everyone presses the button, okay? In this case, they're all actually computer players, so they all press it at the same time. It's kind of funny. At the very end of the minigame, we see this. This is a result screen. Why would this exist? For the same reason that the ready up screen exists. This is a chaotic game, often played in a chaotic party environment, and it's actually kind of difficult to track who is doing well and who is not doing so well. Sometimes it's hard to understand if you did well. What do? You look at your character and then you look at what happened, okay? But you might want to, have some fun with a friend, right? You can see that everyone kind of struggled, but the Yoshi player, who might be your best friend, did the worst. So this would be a good chance to rib them in good humor, okay? And have some fun, all right? So the main thing I want you to take away here is that teaching is a very difficult thing, and it's amazing that so much information can be done in about 6 seconds, okay? 6 seconds. We can give you the setting, the actors, the mechanics you care about, and we can make sure everyone is synchronized all in about 6 seconds, okay? That is being extremely efficient, okay? That is a very, very fast teaching. And it's really important that the developers do this because they have 70 mini games they have to teach. And you're only going to play this game once, so they have to teach you right the first time if anyone's going to have any fun, okay? Another way that the developers try and teach you, they try and guide you, is before that cutscene even begins, before you launch the minigame, you'll actually see some recorded video footage playing of the minigame, showing you what it's about. And they will also give you a very brief line of text, okay, to tell you what the main goal is, what one of the nuances might be. In this case, a golfing minigame. Swing fast and don't hit the bumps, okay? And you can also see that there's actually a practice button you can hit here if you want to practice the game before you play it for real, all right? This is to say that the team puts a lot of effort into trying to teach you how to play the game in order to guide you, okay? Again, they don't want to make E.T., all right? They do not want to make E.T., a game full of cool things that no one could figure out, all right? Thus, education and teaching, tutorialization is a huge deal in game development. It should be a huge deal in your P1 goals. You come up with a new mechanic, your first question should probably be, how would I teach someone this? How would I do it without using a ton of text, okay? How do I do it elegantly? When you see them using text to teach here, Note, text is not always a bad thing. It's not always the most elegant approach, but the thing about this amount of text compared to the manuals that used to be used in the 90s and 80s is that you read this so fast that you basically look at it, oops, you already finished reading, okay? And so it's very, very efficient. It works exceptionally well. You can use it too, just don't use a lot of it, all right? So a good tutorial, a well-guided set of mechanics is going to result in a good showcase at the end of the semester, good grades on your P1 Gold, your P2 Gold, and your P3. Again, just remember how difficult this can be. If you see a screen like this, and you see it in a ton of student games, it's very, very, very hard to understand, oh, the punch? Do I need that yet? If I don't, well, I might forget about it, right? What about the grenade, okay? The melee, how's that different from the punch, okay? In the context of a level as you play through it, when you need the melee, okay, then it's a good time to teach it. But don't just show people this and call it a day. That's not teaching. That stinks, okay? It's not going to work. This has been done before, okay? Games are always trying to teach you something. Have you ever seen this game before? Okay, Pac-Man. And this is going to be footage of the Pac-Man arcade machine. This is a 1980 game, okay? Super early game. This is younger game than even Super Mario Brothers, okay? And I want you to watch what happens when it finishes booting up, okay? You might see the game doing something a little bit familiar. Let's take a look. Did you see it? So this is a technique as old as time, okay? And a very, very effective one at that. So what I'd like to do, now that I've showed you one mini game that tries to teach you how to play it right then and there, I'm going to show you a few more, okay? And I want you to take note and try and get a feel for what they're doing with all these mini games. How do they briefly show you what's going on and what you should focus on, okay? And do it fast. Let's take a look. You say the AI, the computer AI in this game isn't great, but you try writing AI for 70 different minigames, okay? Here we go. One thing that's interesting is if you do especially poorly in these minigames, your character's animation on the result screen is actually different, which really sells how poorly you did. Let's take a look at Bowser's High Dive. one thing I love about this minigame is after you do it properly and Bowser misses you, all right, what does your character do? They do a animation, right? They are modeling how you should feel about the situation, or at least trying to push you in that direction, okay? But hopefully you can see now that teaching people, and especially in a game like Mario Party, is a really, really big deal. So you have to be efficient with it, absolutely. You cannot stuff a lengthy, text-filled tutorial into a minigame collection, a party game, okay? You're going to lose everyone. It's just not going to work, all right? And so that's how it goes. All right, so some announcements, all right? Pigs have joined the player population, as it turns out. I saw this article, and Pigs Can Game, scientists discover, a Vice article. A group of researchers, I forget at what institution, Purdue it looks like, have been experimenting by giving animals access to a joystick and a game that I believe, when they play well, unlocks some treats for them. And so, kind of an interesting thing here. Not the kind of research you see super often, but kind of neat. Let's see here. Bethesda. Have you played any Bethesda games? Okay, have you heard of Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, right? And everyone's favorite Starfield, right? And so Bethesda is a very well-known company for many reasons. They make very big games, and their games tend to be a little bit spotty, okay, technologically, design-wise. But they have some very interesting ways of developing these gigantic open-world games. And in the past, they used to be very, very unique for that. Bethesda, how many of you have ever accidentally created something called a memory leak? You're in EECS 281, or maybe even 280. You have allocated some memory using something like new, and oops, you forgot to delete it, right? Or, sometimes a memory leak can take the form of you have a container. Even in C#, this can happen. You have a container, like a list, and oops, you do something in the game and it adds some items to that list. Oops, you do it again, it adds more items, and you never empty that list. And so the list size just continues to grow and grow and grow and grow, and you never empty it. Eventually you run into memory constraints or speed constraints. The game starts to slow down, eventual crash, right? On the original Xbox, Bethesda had a problem. They were porting a very big game called Elder Scrolls Morrowind to the original Xbox console. And they had memory issues. The game had memory leaks, and on PC that wasn't such a problem. PCs have a lot of RAM, they've got a lot of memory, but the Xbox consoles are actually very weak machines, generally. They have to be very cheap so consumers can buy them, but they still have to have a CPU, a GPU, RAM, storage, right? Often a Wi-Fi card, stuff like that. And so Bethesda discovered that they could resolve their memory leaks with a wonderful, unique solution by shutting off the Xbox without the player knowing and then rebooting the console back into the game during a loading screen. And let's go ahead and take a look.
How are we going to get this to even original Xbox? How are we going to get this to even work? And working with that great tricks that they taught us. My favorite one in Morrowind is you can actually, if you're running low on memory, you can reboot the original Xbox and the user can't tell. You can throw like a screen button. When Morrowind loads sometimes, you get a very long load. That's us rebooting the Xbox. It's called memory redaction. Someone there said, you could do this. Really?
Okay, so why would you do this? Well, you would love to say, Bethesda, just go find and fix your memory leaks. But that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources. And Bethesda isn't a huge team for the size of games that they make. This is also just a port, right? They want to be working on other projects. They want to be working on their next game. The batteries just died, so I'll have to be a little bit louder today. No worries. But that's just how it goes sometimes, right? So can Bethesda find a way to design around their problems and get a half-decent port out? They were able to find this really unique trick. It worked. And so this was probably an excellent engineering decision for the team. Remember, just write better code is not always a solution. You've got deadlines in this course, but you will also find that you always have deadlines in industry. You have deadlines in academia, okay? And so sometimes you just have to make a choice to get the thing done, okay? Hack the solution, get it working, you're done, you can fix it later. If you always are doing that, you will find that your life becomes very difficult, okay? You don't want to do that kind of thing for products and code bases that you have to maintain for a long time, okay? But the fact is, the port was going to be finished in a few months, and then no one was going to care about that port ever again, okay? And so it was probably a good decision. All right. What else do we have going on? Oh, yes, Bethesda. This is the company that took my brilliant assistant, Michael Siciliano. He's at Jackbox Games now, working on Quiplash and stuff like that. Bethesda took 243 days to get back to my star student's job application after an initial phone call. Michael actually took track, and he had to apply to about 50 different studios before he got his first job. It's a tough industry, okay? Another quick thing, an interview on the creation of Pokemon Red and Blue. The people who created the original Pokemon games, they were not a big team. I think they were like tops like around 10 people. They also, during that era, right, in the 90s, I believe it came out, the internet was growing, but it still wasn't huge, okay? The team didn't really fully grasp the scale of what they had created when they released the first Pokemon until one of them went overseas. I think they went to America on a vacation, like walked into a store and started seeing their own characters as plushies. Okay, and that has to be a really, really interesting experience, okay? Imagine you make a $4.94 game, release it on itch.io, only to discover like counterfeit plushies of your characters are in a store in Brazil, okay? Because actually it blew up and no one told you, okay? It seems like something that would be impossible today, but in that era, right, information just didn't quite travel the same way it does today, all right? Okay, so our mission today is going to be to kind of finish up our talk on guidance and also to finish up our kind of intro talks on game design. We're going to continue talking about game design throughout the course, and especially in your feedback on Project 2 and Project 3, you're going to get a lot of game design feedback. But we would like to start talking about design patterns again. We would like to start talking about other stuff and tools. And so we're going to finish up some of our game design stuff today, okay? We'll then move on to the topic of composition. I don't think we've talked about that in this course yet, right? So this question of why does someone choose to use components over inheritance, okay? Inheritance is what we learned in EECS 280 and practice in EECS 281. So why are we using so many components for code reuse these days, okay? Why don't we just stick to what we know, inheritance, all right? We're going to talk about that today. So let's go ahead and get back into it. If you remember, last time we played through ET, and ET had some problems. For the time, it had a lot of interesting mechanics, okay? A lot of content, but it was made extremely quickly, and not a lot of user testing was done. And so most of the things in the game are extremely confusing, all right? You cannot rely on your player to read a manual. You cannot just put a readme.txt into your game's files and expect someone to read them. They almost never do, okay? Unless they really like your game and they're having problems, all right? This led to a crash of the video game industry. The quality and the saturation of games, right, was a big problem, okay? And things crashed. Nintendo eventually brought them back, which is part of the reason that particular company and these particular characters are so beloved by so many. aside from them just being very, very high quality, okay? ET had a lot of problems, but these are problems we see in other games as well. Eventually, ET would atone for their mistakes, at least in part, by releasing games that had excellent guidance, okay? Kya Dark Lineage, right? You remember how many different things the game introduces to you. Movement and jumping, new characters, diving, kicking things into traps that will pick you up, right, and trap you. All of these things the game introduces without much text at all. When it does introduce text, it brings it in at just the right time. You remember shape and color of the environment can funnel people into certain directions. Light, like these God rays coming down, light, like you see in Left 4 Dead, will attract people to certain locations in an environment, okay? In fast-paced scene in particular, putting arrows in the environment or using rare colors like blue in a Middle Eastern environment will attract attention and guide players' attention to where you need it to be, okay? Using the camera to focus on certain things in the distance is super useful. Ratchet & Clank, Mario 3D World, all that good stuff. Avoid this at all costs, right? I've complained about this a few times today already. But Kya Dark Lineage is a game that teaches you an enormous amount in the first 10 minutes. It does so very elegantly, and thus it's a cult classic. People do really like this game, though it came out late. One of the most important things to remember, and that we want to see you use, is the practice performance approach, okay? Sequence learning, the homework before the exam approach, okay? Always introduce things in a safe environment that allows for experimentation, okay? Then, later, ask for a performance. Ask the player to demonstrate that they understand what is going on. You can then mix and match things for a final boss or a final exam later, okay? So, a lot of really good stuff in Kya Dark Lineage. But I want to remind you of these things and exercise you again, okay? Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the biggest games that Nintendo has ever done. It has a lot of new things that the Legend of Zelda series has never had before. And so the question that these designers faced is, how do we deal with that? How are we going to teach players how to manage all of this without them feeling overwhelmed or lost? And so, in the first 5 minutes, they do something extremely clever. One of the largest games that the world had ever seen has one of the smallest and tightest openings that Nintendo's ever done. So, let's take a look. This is the intro to Breath of the Wild. Let's see what you can notice. How does Nintendo teach the player?
Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Wake up, Link.
is a cheaper slate. Take it. It will help guide you after your long slumber. Hold the cheaper slate up to the pedestal. That will show you the way. Link, you are the light, our light, that must shine upon Hyrule once again. Now go.
All right. Very, very brief introduction. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. You are out of the cave and into the wilderness, and you can start going in whatever direction you want, okay? Once you get out here, you are still actually confined to a small area. It's small. It's actually fairly large compared to most games, but the game doesn't tell you that just yet. So what did you notice in that cave tutorial? How did they teach you things? What were they trying to teach you? Why were they trying to teach you those things? What did you notice? Yeah.
Well, confined you to a really small space, so you had to learn about specific functionality, like the inventory, how to provide what chests are.
Yeah. Absolutely. Fantastic, right? This gigantic game begins in the smallest of spaces, and one of the reasons that they do that is so that they can put things right in front of your face that you are almost certainly not going to miss, okay? The equipable weapons and stuff, the clothes, okay? The Legend of Zelda series hasn't really had that kind of thing in exactly that way, So what do? They have you walk down a hallway that has the chests right in your face. You can walk past them if you want to. You almost certainly will not, okay? What else did we learn? How did we learn it? Yes?
You learn by doing with the inventory, by actually equipping these things. It's not just like, here's your inventory, here's what you do with it. It actually let you use it.
Yeah. Yep. You get to not only get something new, but it brings up the inventory and helps you equip it. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, Link is established as being very confused, and when everything's happening, it's sort of like he jumps back in surprise, and I think that adds to it, as well as like everything's given sequentially. So you're given one control at a time, and then sometimes it'll light up.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning, it showed you could look around and move.
Bingo.
And then once you got to the second slate, it told you what button to press, and then you had a little narrator telling you like what it was.
Yeah.
It was just all very, I don't know, it wasn't all information at once. It was
excellent.
Gradual.
Very, very good. Yep, so a bunch of things you noticed there. Number one, in many games there's an effort to sync up the state of the player and the state of the main character so that you can better kind of project yourself onto that main character. A good example here, right, is amnesia. Amnesia is a very, very common trope in games, but also in films as well, and novels. Why would you want to, sync up the player? There's a bit of a problem in games where the main player character is a super powerful, knowledgeable, experienced warrior, let's say, or wizard, or witch. The player is completely new to this game. The player does not have knowledge of its systems, how it works, its mechanics, and yet the player character in the universe is supposed to have a lot of information on all of these things. That disconnect can kind of break your suspension of disbelief if you're paying close attention. And so making Link wake up from a gigantic long coma is a great way to synchronize the player with Link. Neither of those two have any idea what's going on, okay? So it's easier to sympathize. Another thing you mentioned was that this intro only gives you information at the exact moment you need it. Just in time, okay? That's exactly what we're looking for, okay? In Kya Dark Lineage, the game doesn't tell you the control, the button for jump, until the first moment where you have to jump over a tree that has trapped you, okay? Likewise, when you take control of this game, the only thing it tells you is how to move your camera and how to move Link. That's it. That is it, okay? Later, once you start to collect things, it introduces more controls so that you can learn them and then immediately apply them, okay? Anything else you noticed? There's a big one I'll go over in just a sec. Pretty good job, though. Pretty good, okay? This is the first moment in which you take control of Link, the main player character, okay? The camera has been set up to frame this shot. What in this shot grabs your attention? This is the first thing you see when you can start to make your own decisions. So what do you see? Yeah. Yeah, there isn't a whole lot in this shot. It's kind of foggy, it's kind of dim, but there is a glowing pedestal with some lights over here next to a door, okay? If you look around, what is in this room? Do you remember what's in this room? There's nothing in this room. It's a tiny room. There's nothing interesting on the walls. There's nothing to look at. There's no interesting art details. There's nothing to interact with. You cannot leave this room until you do what?
Open the door.
Well, what opens the door?
Sheikah slate.
Exactly. You cannot open this door and leave the room until you grab the Sheikah slate from this pedestal. I want you to imagine for a second, what if Nintendo left the Sheikah slate at that pedestal, like it currently is, right? But they accidentally left the door open. What could happen? What complete and utter disaster could some players walk themselves into? Yes? Yeah. They could accidentally walk out the door. They could look at the pedestal and go, oh, I'll come back later, and then forget about it. And then suddenly they have gotten outside into the larger world without the most important mechanic in the game, the Sheikah slate. They can't use any of its powers, thus they can't solve any of its puzzles, okay? And you know what's even worse? the player is going to get to challenges that they don't have the right item for, and they won't know that item even exists. Okay? They will have to walk back and explore the entire rest of the game, retracing their steps for hours, possibly, before eventually finding the thing that they missed. Or more likely, they'll just look up a walkthrough, a YouTube tutorial, see they missed this thing hours ago, and then run back to get it and be really angry at you. Or, I think the most likely, they just return the game, leave you a bad review, and correctly assume that the product is broken. It is. That's how bad that mess up would be. And so, Nintendo traps you in this area until you get the thing that they want you to get, okay? Remember in Metroid, the Morph Ball, right? In Metroid, you get the Morph Ball, okay? You cannot proceed very far unless you have it. And once you get it, you are trapped in a little room until you use it to roll under a ledge, okay? Fantastic, fantastic, elegant player guidance. You see this everywhere, okay? Here's what we were talking about earlier. When you take control of the game, we get these controls that come in, okay? Move, you can press the plus button on the pad to see your controls, and then camera. That's all you're told, okay? You're not told how to jump. You're not told how to climb or how to attack. You don't need those things yet, okay? And so they're delayed. Another cool thing here, these control icons don't just pop into existence, okay? They flash, okay? They have this glow to them that then fades. This animation is there to try and get your attention. These controls are at the bottom of the screen, and so it's very likely that without that flash animation, you wouldn't notice that they're there, okay? They would come and go and, oops, was I supposed to read that? Okay, you go grab your Nintendo Switch from the pedestal, and the door opens, okay? And you're allowed to proceed, okay? I call this trap progression. It's very, very similar to what you see in Metroid and a lot of games. Give the player something new and then trap the player. Don't let them go on until they demonstrate how to use the new thing, okay? That way they have the new item and they also have the knowledge to use it, okay? This is one of the most interesting moments in the initial 5 minutes, the tutorial. The most important mechanic in this game is the ability to climb. You can climb on any surface you want, okay, for the most part. In previous Legend of Zelda games, you could climb, but only where you saw moss or only where you saw a ladder, okay? It wasn't nearly as free form as in this game. And so, Nintendo really wants you to know that climbing is a big deal in this game, okay? Thus, they put a big wall in front of you on the way out. You're not going to leave this tutorial until you prove to us that you have discovered the game's most important mechanic. To do otherwise would be a big disaster. Players could get outside, they could get to a puzzle where the puzzle is climb up this wall, and they look at the wall and go, I don't think I can climb that. In previous games, I couldn't climb that. So I'm going to leave and go someplace else. I'm going to look at something else. Maybe I missed something. No, you just walk up to the wall, you climb it, right? And this is the moment where all players will learn this. Okay, when you start to climb, you see a little green orb appear, okay? This UI element is very interesting from a UI design perspective. Notice the player's health is in the top left corner, okay, far away from the center of the screen. Other information is in the bottom right corner of the screen, okay? Why would Nintendo choose to put this bar in the middle of the screen near your character when you are climbing? For those who haven't played the game, this bar drains as you climb and as you hold onto a wall, and when it empties, you will lose your grip and fall, okay? Why do we put this bar at the center of our screen?
It's immediately important, and it's also temporary.
Yes, it is very timely information, and it is so important while you're climbing. If this bar runs out at the wrong moment while you're climbing, you could perish and have to reset, right? And so, where do you think the player's eyes will be on the screen while they are climbing? Where do you think their eyes are going to be for most of the game?
Their actual character.
Yes. If you watch where players' eyes tend to go, and there are really cool like user testing devices that will let you look at where players' pupils are focusing on a screen, you'll notice that most of the time they will keep their eyes on the player character or in the center of the screen. Okay? So the most important information you usually want to be there. In this case, while you are climbing, the most important information is your stamina wheel. Okay? And so it gets put right there. All right. But again, this is a trap progression. We're going to trap the player in this little cave until they prove they know how to climb out. All right? When you exit the cave for the first time, you get this beautiful intro cinematic in which the player is introduced to the large open world that this game has to offer. And the game takes over, you do a cutscene, and we get this shot. I have a question for you. Especially I want to hear this if you haven't played the game. Where do you think the final boss is? Where do you think the game ends? Where are you trying to go?
The like castle straight ahead of me.
Yeah, exactly. All right, how do you know that? The camera has set it up for you. It is the place you are trying to go. The most interesting location in the map, Hyrule Castle, is now perfectly framed by the camera, and you are trying to get there, okay? It is a shot that Nintendo liked so much they put it on their box, okay? And what's happening here is camera guidance, but what's also happening is that you're having your long-term, medium-term, and short-term objectives set, okay? Right here, we have a long-term objective, right? Motion in the distance. We talked about this earlier during our game design, right? Talk. Interesting decisions talk, okay? You have a long-term objective, right, of this volcano in the distance. Wow, I want to go there. But on the way, you have things like the castle. In the shorter term, you have things like these ruins that are kind of on the way there, but might have treasure. They're interesting, okay? And then when you turn, when your camera turns, you see something right next to you that is of extreme importance. A short-term objective, okay, this beautiful cathedral, which is just a minute's walk away. What's more, you also see something really unique. You see the first living soul that you've seen in the game thus far, okay? An old man, another old man, right, sitting at a campfire. The old man turns to walk away, showing motion to catch your attention, and then this is the first gameplay camera shot you're given as you exit this important cutscene, okay? This camera shot is doing 1,000 things, all right? Link seems to be looking at something. You can see the old man walking to his fire, okay? You can see the cathedral over here, okay? What is Link looking at, by the way? What do you think Nintendo's designers want you to do next? What do you think they want you to learn about next, just based on this one shot that they set up? Yeah.
Like a mushroom or something next to the tree.
There's a mushroom next to the tree, but there's something closer. Yes. There's a stick. A stick. What is the stick useful for? It's your first weapon. It is time to introduce the player to weapons, because they might run into enemies out here. All right, we would really like them to know a little bit about attacking before they run into those enemies, okay? I don't know about you, but Nintendo wanted you to pick up this stick so badly that they said, yeah, let's make wood shiny. I don't know if I've ever seen wood shine and glimmer, okay, in the sunlight before. But this stick does. They really wanted to catch your attention on this stick, okay? And so you see that in games, we are always trying to teach things. If we cannot teach players our game mechanics, then they're not going to be able to make decisions. And if they can't make decisions, they're not going to enjoy anything in our game, okay? The Super Mario Bros. First level, okay, has very little text, all right? But if you didn't read the manual, you still ended up loving this game, chances are. If you look at this first level really closely, you'll probably see things there that you didn't realize were there, okay? Do you see these pipes and how they get taller each time? Some context might be appropriate. This is one of the first games ever made to feature variable jump height, where if you tap the jump button, you do a tiny jump. But if you hold the jump button, you do a big jump, right? In previous platforming games like Donkey Kong, you just pressed the jump button and you just got the jumping arc that you got, okay? It didn't matter how long you held it. You could tap it, you could hold it, you get the same crappy little jump, okay? But Super Mario Brothers is one of the first games with a really expressive, wonderful jump that feels great, has great physics. And so you can imagine the game developers wanted to kind of teach you about this, right? And you can see how they tried to do so with these ever taller pipes. The first one you can just tap to get over, but then you have to start holding it if you want to get over these, okay? And of course, you're given a few pipes to practice with. Over here, right down here, you have a really fun one. You have a really precise jump, okay? You have to kind of climb up these steps, and then when you're on the top of the step, you have to jump to the other side and then climb down, right? What happens if you mess up here? What happens if you mess up this more precise jump?
You just try to jump out.
Yeah, you just fall into this little bush, right? Yeah, it's no big deal, okay? But wait a second. Immediately afterward, you have the same jump, okay? You have to climb up, kind of precise. They made it a little bit. They gave you a little bit more lift-off area here. But what happens if you mess up this second time? Yeah, you die, okay? Practice performance. Practice performance, okay? Exactly what we've been seeing from the games that we've shown today, all right? And so, right, you want to have this in your projects as well. Think about not only what will I add to my game and what decisions will players make, but how are we going to give the player some time to experiment and learn about these decisions, and then how will we apply pressure to them later to really get serious about these decisions and learn it in a very careful way. So that question of what makes a good game, right? Interesting decisions, but that's not enough. We need player guidance as well. We need other things. We need juice and game feel as well. If you're interested in these kinds of essays and lectures, you can find a lot of great channels on YouTube. There are way more now, okay? You already saw Game Maker's Toolkit. We already heard a clip on No Man's Sky out of Joseph Anderson. Matthew Matosis is great, but there are deep dives, video essayists on YouTube that will spend 4+ hours dissecting your favorite games in every way they can, and we'll go over a lot of this stuff, okay? And you'll learn a lot by doing so. So any comments or questions on the topic of guidance? It's not easy, and I'll tell you this from industry experience. You might kind of tear your hair out if you watch players, okay? You're going to set things up. You're going to think, oh, I'm going to create a great puzzle. Okay, I'm going to teach players how to use this mechanic. And then players will go and play the game, and they'll get super confused, okay? I have put super important keys on a table under a blinking spotlight with a big arrow sign telling people you'd better pick up this key. It's super important for the next room. And then I watch as my players walk right past it. Okay? Oh, that's cool. Oh, see it. Why are you doing this? Okay, grab the key. Grab the key. Are you crazy? What are you doing? Right? You can't win them all. No matter how much you try and teach people in your games, sometimes they will just ignore it or they will not be in the mood for it, okay, and it just won't work. But you have to get in there and you have to iterate, okay? While most of my players aren't able to see that super important item in the background, maybe I need to put like a little lamp over it to make it spotlighted, make it more interesting, right? Oh, okay, now 50% of my players are finding it. Okay, well, what if I change the color of the key so that it's like glowing red, okay? Oh, now 70% of my players are finding it, okay? And you're starting to get to the point where we can move on, all right? So keep in mind, it's very hard to get things perfect here, but you can iterate things to get better and better, okay? We talked about interesting decisions and we talked about guidance, but I want to go over some very common game design issues. Did we talk about this previously? I don't think we did, okay? One thing you want to avoid, and you definitely want to avoid it in this course, is disrespecting the player's time, or more commonly, you stretch the player's time in a way that really shouldn't be stretched, okay? Has anyone played a game called Halo? Very, very common first-person shooter game, very popular, very well-regarded. But there's one level, there's one mission in Halo that most players didn't really like, okay? It's a level called the Library. And the Library features an enemy called the Flood, okay? It's kind of a zombie-like parasitic creature, and it's pretty fun, pretty scary the first few times you fight it. But you know how the Library works? During the Library mission, you fight your way to the end of this area, and then once you get to the end, guess what you do? Do you complete the mission? No. You go all the way back. All the way back through, same map, nothing really changes, and that's it. So why would the developers do this? We're going to give you a bunch of interesting decisions, and then at the end of the Library mission, we just say, hey, why don't you do that twice, and just send you back. Why would they do this? Players do not like this mission. They find it boring. They find it too long. They find it to be stretched out. Too few new interesting decisions to make over too long a time. Why did the developers probably do this?
Show you how much better you got?
Yeah, not really. There are lots of other ways to do that. Good idea, but definitely not. Yes, at the back. Increase playtime. Bingo. This is a single-player game, and we need single-player games to be worth the money, worth the $60 or $70 you pay for them. Bungie's publisher, Microsoft, might have said, hey, Bungie, we need this game's campaign. We need its story mode to be at least 6 or 7 hours long, okay? So Bungie, having deadlines, could go create another mission, or they could pack that that walk back with a ton of interesting new enemies and some interesting new level design, right? Or, facing deadlines, they could just copy, paste. Bingo, we just doubled the length of our mission, no big deal, right? Unfortunately, no. Players really did not like it. So be very, very careful with your players' time. In this course, we tend to not have too many time requirements, right? On these P1 golds, the custom levels tend to take around 5 minutes. But if you are packing them full of decisions and really exploring your main mechanics, you could get away with less than that or more than that, okay? It's hard to say. Most P3 projects, most showcase games, will be between 15 to 20 minutes in length, okay? But if it's a really good 10 minutes, you're not going to lose points for that, okay? It's not going to happen. A lot of game designers really struggle with teaching the player, okay? We just did a big lecture on that. You do not want to jam your game full of lengthy tutorials, especially ones that are full of text, especially ones that give away the secrets of the game without letting the player find them. One of the reasons we want to be subtle and we want to let players kind of discover things on their own is that it's way more satisfying that way. If I give you a game that has a really cool puzzle, and I come up to you and I say, hey, to solve this puzzle, you have to do this, this, and this. And a character walks up and tells you how to complete the puzzle. And you go complete the puzzle. Does that sound great to you? Like, does that sound fulfilling? No, right? You want to own that discovery. You want the hand of the designer to be invisible so that the player is likely to get through the game. But they will feel as if they're doing it mostly by themselves. They can mostly own that victory, right? They grew, they learned something, and it allowed them to succeed, okay? If you're just giving everything away, they're not going to have that same feeling, okay? It's just not going to work, all right? This is the biggest mistake that most game designers make, most student game designers absolutely, okay? They assume players are telepathic, and they punish players for things that they couldn't have known, okay? This is the same feeling you get when on an exam you come upon a question that was nowhere in the slides. It was nowhere in the homeworks. It was nowhere in the discussions. And you think, this isn't a fair exam question, right? We didn't even talk about this stuff. Have you ever ran into a question that kind of felt that way? I'm guessing it didn't feel too good, right? So I want to ask you a question. This is a game called Mickey's Dangerous Chase. I love this game. It is an excellent game. If you have a chance to play it, I recommend it. It is a game for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. It was one of the first games I had for that system way back in the day. A game from my childhood, a very difficult game, but a very fun game. This stage you're looking at is an awesome stage. You have to climb up this building, okay? It's the second to last stage in the entire game. You have to climb up the building as the camera continuously rises. If you're not fast enough, you'll kind of fall off the bottom of the camera and you'll lose a life, okay? In this game, it's a very kind of old school game, right? And I love that style. It has a finite life system, so you can only make a certain amount of mistakes before you have to start completely again. And so, my question to all of you in this very high-stakes scenario is, raise your hand if you are going to jump to the right. Okay, raise your hand if instead you're going to jump to the left. I regret to inform you that all of you have perished. You died. Sorry. If your idea here was to jump to the left, you're going to die. Sorry. Wait, I've got a question for you. How did you choose that you wanted to jump to the left? Everyone wanted to jump to the left for some reason. Yes?
It's closer to the bottom
Yeah,
platform.
it's a bit closer. I got it. Now, in the game itself, both of those are pretty easy jumps to make. The problem, as you're going to see, is that if you go to the left, you will discover that there are no more platforms over here. And by the time you kind of say, okay, abort mission, let's go back to the right, you're out of time. That platform is gone now. Okay, you can't get to it before it's off the bottom of the screen and you are dead. Okay? There was no way to know ahead of time that the left route was going to lead to your demise and the right route was the right choice. I want you to imagine for a second that you're on your final life. It's very exciting, very high pressure, and you just kind of go left, and you're dead, and you have to play the whole game again. How would that make you feel? Right? You want to break the game. You want to send it back. You can't believe this. This is garbage, right? The game designers are being very cruel, okay? And that's how you feel. If the video is still working, I want to show you what the moment is, because there's another thing that's nasty in this video too. Let's watch.
Whoa, just random plans. Also,
Dead. Right?
I hope you guys memorize the layout level, because apparently that happens.
Right? So what happened here, right? I think, let's see. So a couple things happen in this gameplay footage that really upsets our player. The first one is that a pot falls from nowhere with no warning, inches from the player's head at the top of the screen. That's not exactly fair, okay? How is the player supposed to know that that's coming in? There's no telegraph, there's no warning, there's no danger sign, right? They just take damage. If you get unlucky, you take damage, okay? Let's watch this one more time. Okay, you gotta go right. You gotta go right. He didn't go right, so he's dead. Very sad, huh?
Also, I hope you guys memorize the layout level, because apparently that happens.
Right? And you can just feel the frustration. Thankfully, this player has a ton of extra lives, and so he can burn some of them learning and memorizing the layout of the stage. There's some satisfaction in doing that, but the penalty here is severe. There are a lot of games that are a bit more punishing. They expect you to fail and die and learn in doing so. But those games usually don't have finite chances, okay? In Dark Souls, when you die, you lose your experience points. That is a punishing punishment, okay? The stakes are extremely high. But Dark Souls is also a game that goes to great lengths to be as fair as possible. Usually, it will not just punish you, okay? If you're paying attention, you can usually foresee things coming and avoid them, and you'll be fine, all right? So please, never assume your players are telepathic. You are not allowed to punish them, generally. You should not punish them for things they couldn't have known. If you want a dangerous obstacle up ahead, then you also have to think about how will a very attentive and wise player avoid this, okay? Maybe there's some warning sign, or there's some shaking, or the obstacle appears, but it doesn't immediately launch at you. It gives you an animation first, so you know how to duck out of the way, right? Something like that, okay? And then the last thing, and this is kind of a very technical thing you want to avoid, are soft locks. Have I talked about those? What those look like? A soft lock is when the software is still running, okay? You don't have an infinite loop, okay? It hasn't hard frozen, okay? But the game's design has conspired to make further progress impossible. And this is a very easy mistake to make. And if you make it on your P1 Gold and we can't finish grading, we can't grade content we can't get to. That's going to be a 0, okay? 0 for all of those tasks we couldn't get to. So I want to show you a fun soft lock from Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. This can happen very early on into the game, and you know about triggers and invisible colliders, right? And so this is going to be really cool to you. You're going to understand what happened very quickly, all right? Let's take a look.
At the very beginning of the story, Mario arrives at the Road Port Harbor and quickly runs into trouble with the X-Nauts. After Lord Crump is defeated and he calls on his henchmen, the earliest soft lock in the game can be performed. If Mario jumps into water, a piranha will deal 1 damage and respawns us at a nearby point. In this room, Mario is expected to touch the dog before falling underwater, which updates his spawn position. In the event we jump around and bypass the dog altogether, Mario is relocated to the default edge of the harbor. The thing is, all the X-Nauts blocking Mario's path function as though they are nearby, since the developers extended their hitbox along the negative Z-axis. No matter what you try to do, Mario ends up permanently stuck, not even 5 minutes into a playthrough.
Right? And so you can see what happened. They accidentally put the collider, or the trigger they're using, they extended it along the Z-axis kind of in an invisible fashion, and you can't get past it, right? And so, soft lock, right? You do not want these to be in your game if possible, and you know, if someone runs into them, it can be disastrous. They can lose a lot of progress, okay? And a lot of time and energy. Okay, blah, 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 blah. I won't say much on this topic. Game design is a very young, new medium, all right? If you go to various institutions, you will find that they are trying to categorize elements of game design. They're trying to formalize game design into something that can be studied, something that can be applied consistently. It feels like it could be somewhat fruitless in the long term to me. Game design is a nebulous concept. Tastes and trends are ever shifting. But if you want to study game development and game design at a graduate level, University of Southern California, USC, has a fantastic program. I almost ended up going there. They're just very expensive, though. Carnegie Mellon, quite a few of my students actually go to Carnegie Mellon's ETC, Entertainment Technology Center, I believe it's called. And they're a fantastic, fantastic program. Michigan State University, okay, does not get enough respect around here. I'll say it, okay? It hurts me to say it. But when it comes to game development and game design, they are the university in the state to do this kind of thing at. And if you get in-state tuition, I think they're like the #1, maybe #2 public university for game development in the United States. So definitely a great place to consider teaching, learning if you want to. The person who used to teach EECS 494, the person I learned under and helped him teach the course, my mentor Jeremy Bond, who you might see at the showcase actually, he tends to come, went to Michigan State University's program to teach their program there. They've got about 10 to 12 faculty with games, and I'm pretty much your only one in the COE here, okay? And that's, they just got a lot of opportunity. They got a lot of really cool courses over there as a result. We've got an ever-expanding catalog here, but there's only so much I can do, okay? There are formal there are formal systems for trying to figure out what game design is, game design frameworks, things like MDA, FDD. You can read about them in books like Intro to Game Design, Prototyping, and Development. But I will say that in this course, we don't really use these very much. Blah, 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 blah. In this course, the best way to think about game design, interesting decisions, make them consequential, okay? Novel, long, medium, and short term, and player guidance so that players can get to and understand and make sense of and experiment with those interesting decisions, okay? Pair that with juice and some game feel, which we will talk about in the near future, and you're going to end up in a pretty good situation, all right? We can talk more about formal game design patterns in the future if you want to. Let's go ahead. We are quite a ways into a lecture now, so let's go ahead and take our 5-minute break. Then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about a fascinating engineering topic that may have been on your mind. What is up with these components? Why do they exist? Why does pretty much every game engine under the sun, from Unity to Unreal Engine, why does it have components? Why does it use components so heavily? There has to be a reason, and there is, okay? See you in 5 minutes. Right. Test 1, 2, 3. Okay.
So I was looking into the Zelda, Legend of Zelda's like drop mechanic. Yeah, they have like the loot table and the kill count and all that. I'm curious, like, how common is that kind of thing in other games versus just like
Well, what comes to mind is that most mobile games and MMOs have, they definitely have like a stochastic kind of, they have a way of determining probabilities that it's not deterministic, really. And so you might say that, hey, like if you kill a particular wolf mob, there is like a 5% chance of this particular health dropping. And that can, I think that can be very like simple. You could have a table of different probabilities. They all take it together at 20. And whenever an enemy is killed, we'll just use that table, drop table, and we'll see what spawns. The Legend of Zelda, I think, works a bit differently, if I recall. It's like you can actually predict when a certain item will drop based on, I think, how many enemies you've defeated. Is that right? Yeah. You don't have to replicate that.
yeah.
On the NES, their facilities for randomness probably weren't nearly as good, right? So implementing like stochastic mechanics was probably a bit trickier. So in many speedrunning communities for old games, you'll find that they have figured out how the game generates their randomness. And it's usually not very random. And if the player can manipulate, figure out what's coming next, or if they can take some action in the game that changes what comes next, what drops next, to something that they really want.
Yeah.
That could be a really big element of speedrunning those games.
Yeah, I just remember I found a table detailing all this on a speedrunning site.
Yes. I mean, those are the people who would care, so no surprise that they figured it out. Yeah, stochastic, probabilistic, chancy. I don't know.
Makes sense.
They're all synonyms as far as I understand.
But loot tables aren't like loot tables have kind of been replaced by just better interaction.
Usually, like I think sometimes you'll find really old school developers who, you know, they implement some of these things in a very old fashioned way. But right now in Unity, there's a Unity engine.random.range function.
Yeah.
You just call it, you give it a minimum, you give it a maximum, it'll give you some number in between.
Yep.
Like 99% of developers are probably just going to use that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, sorry. I have something more. So, like, real quick, I think in the earlier lecture you were talking about how you only have one flying sword projectile because the NES is just like limited.
Usually that was like for technical limitations.
But then the dragon shoots 3 fireballs.
What's up?
The dragon shoots 3 fireballs.
Yeah. And it might be the case that like they were worried about what happens if the player launches 5 swords when 3 fireballs are on screen with the dragon. It's like, for safety, we better just limit it to 1. But it can also be a bit of game design as well. So one implication of this is if you are firing a sword at a nearby enemy and you miss, you can't fire another one for a while because it has to go to the end of the screen.
Yeah.
So it punishes inaccuracy. If you are able to hit that enemy, the sword despawns earlier, which means you can send it out earlier, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to it. Let's see how long my microphone lasts before I have to start yelling. Already my voice is starting to get a bit shot here. We can feel sorry for the EECS 440 students and the 498 Game Engine Architecture students tonight. They're going to get like raspy old man Austin. We'll see how that goes. I want to talk to you about something called the composition design pattern. Basically, components. Where do they come from? Why? But before we do that, I want to show you a game that I've always really admired, one that I find frankly amazing. Okay? This is a game called Scribblenauts. Has anyone heard of it? Okay, has anyone played it? Okay? So if you haven't, this is a game, Okay? Ignore that over there. All right? I want to reset my stage here. This is a game in which actually the mechanics are extremely simple. Okay? There's one core mechanic to this game. If you can spell it, you can have it. So I need a word. I need a noun. Give me a noun. I don't care what it is.
Barn.
Barn? Is this to your liking? Okay, give me another noun, but I also want an adjective with it. A fast car. Nice. Okay. I'm going to ride that car around. Okay, looks pretty good. Now you might say, is this really a fast car? Well, let's just get a normal car. Not nearly as fast. Okay, not too bad. What else? What else? Let's get more creative.
A rideable tortoise.
A rideable tortoise. I don't know if a rideable is going to work but we'll see. Can we get a tortoise? We can. Can we get a rideable tortoise? I want a big rideable tortoise. How about that? Wow. No way. And look at, they're all looking at the big tortoise. Maybe they'll follow me. This is pretty amazing, isn't it? But this isn't good enough. I want a flying, gigantic, rideable tortoise. And before I get that, yeah, hold on. Oh? I think I've got one tortoise riding on another tortoise, and I'm riding it. Okay, I want a bazooka. I want a magical bazooka. Okay? So that I might fight gigantic zombie Cthulhu. Ah. Okay, two battle. This is all getting a bit messy, so I want a... Oh, did it not explode? Okay, hold on. Interact. Oh, my tortoise died. Oh, it's because the Cthulhu infected the tiny tortoises. So now they are fighting. Oh, there we go. All right. Anyway, isn't this an amazing game? I've always thought that if you needed to teach a kid to spell, if you wanted to get a young child, really excited about language, right, and spelling things accurately, this would be the perfect game for that. Hey, kid, you can have anything you want, literally anything you can imagine, if you can spell it. That provides a really good incentive. So, one thing we should ask ourselves as engineers is, how is this game possible? This is a game called Scribblenauts. It's a 2009 game, so fairly old by now. It was created by a company called Fifth Cell and Warner Brothers. Now, Warner Brothers is a very big corporation, but what you might not know is that Fifth Cell is not that big. Fifth Cell, I think, is a team of like 40 to 50 people's tops. What does that mean? Probably about 10 to 15 engineers and 20 to 25 artists. Okay? That's probably it. That is probably it. And so in this game, you can create any object by typing its name. and I mean any object. If you want to type, for instance, a professor, you will get a professor, all right? If you want to type jackalope, do you know what a jackalope is? Jackalopes don't even exist. It's a mythical hybrid creature, a bunny and a deer. There it is. It's in the game. Okay, you type jackalope and it shows up. It is absolutely obscene. It is incredible how many objects they were able to make. If it's in the dictionary, there's a very good chance you can type it. And as you saw, even adjectives work. So you have a bajillion characters you can spawn in and objects. But then on top of that, they all have a bajillion variants. Rideable jackalope, gigantic jackalope, ice jackalope, right? Flying zombie gigantic rideable jackalope, okay? All possible in this game. And so, as engineers, something that we always want to ask when we see something incredible like this is, technologically, how did a smallish team manage to build something so impressive? Okay? How did they do it? And one answer you might say is, well, you know what? They probably had to reuse a lot. Reuse a lot of code, reuse a lot of assets. And the answer is right. The answer today is going to end up being composition, okay? Composition, a fantastic way to take the little bits of logic, okay, and pop it onto an object, all right, to change how it works, okay? You see composition across all of the major game engines. Unity loves it. Unreal uses it as well, okay? And if you take the Game Engine Architecture upper level CS course, available now, you will get a chance to build your own composition-based engine, okay? But what exactly is composition? How does it work? And how do we get it, okay? How are we going to reuse all this good stuff, okay? Well, one way that you already know how to reuse a lot of stuff is via inheritance. You learn this in EECS 280, EECS 281. It's one of the most popular methods of code and asset reuse in the world, okay? And basically every programming language supports it, okay? If you have C#, if you have Java, C++, okay, it's going to support it. Now, its usage is typically like this, all right? You create what is called an ISA hierarchy, an inheritance hierarchy, an inheritance tree. You could have, for instance, a very generic high-level object class that has a few things in it, but not a ton of things, okay? And maybe a human ISA object, okay? So the human data type introduces some new functions, some new variables. But a professor is a human, a student is a human, and they introduce their own twists on what human gives you, which is a twist on what object gives you, okay? A rabbit is an object, a jackalope is a rabbit, which is an object, okay? This is how it tends to go. And if you are creating an inheritance hierarchy in, for instance, C++, this is how it tends to look, okay? The little colon, and then public, and then the name of the data type. That's how you set up a basic inheritance tree, okay? Like that. You've seen this before, right? C++ is kind of a weird syntax for inheritance. I think almost every language does it a little bit nicer, but it's fine. So in Unity, in the code that you've been writing, we already have inheritance at work. For instance, you've probably seen this in C#, colon and then some data type. That establishes inheritance. This data type will now get all the variables, the public ones, and functions from the affordance class. You've probably seen this. You have some sort of component data type that derives from monobehavior. Remember, monobehavior is just a synonym for component. It's a really unfortunate name. I really am unhappy that Unity chose it, okay, because this just confuses a ton of my students. But you have a lot of inheritance happening within Unity. But it's certainly not the star of the show, okay? You even have a lot of inheritance in Unreal Engine as well. I have a scenario for you, and we're going to use inheritance to try and solve it, okay? Congratulations, you have become a new employee at our local game studio, And as one of your first jobs, you've been tasked with creating a character in Unity, okay? We're going to use inheritance to do this. Your first mission is to create a panda object, a panda game object, a panda prefab. So how are we going to do this? Well, you might say, hey, I want to use inheritance, and I'm guessing this is not the last object that my boss is going to ask us for. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an inheritance tree so I can share logic, okay? I can share features and stuff like that. Here's what it's going to look like. We're going to have a panda class that derives from bear. Bear that derives from mammal. Mammal derives from living entity, and living entity derives from object. At all different levels of this inheritance tree, we're going to put different functionality. We're going to put different bits of code. For instance, if we ever want to create a grizzly bear, we'll be able to reuse most of that logic by just inheriting from bear, okay? Sounds good, right? Sounds reasonable. The next day, your boss comes in and says, you know what? What I really want is a frozen ice panda. And it's the holidays, right? The holidays, it's getting cold, so let's get some icy pandas going. What are you going to do to really easily and quickly create this ice panda? Where will we put it in the inheritance hierarchy?
Ice panda is still a panda, so I guess we inherit.
Yeah, an ice panda is a panda. And so we can put it right here. That makes a lot of sense. We get all the panda code and we write a little bit more to make it icy. Nice, not too bad. What about Lovecraftian panda? Eldritch panda. Maybe it's October now and we want a horror-themed panda. What are we going to do? What do we do now? Yeah. Yeah, we can inherit from panda. Again, we don't want to inherit from ice panda because we'll end up with a bunch of ice functionality in our Eldritch panda, which doesn't make any sense, okay? But this is still a reasonable hierarchy, and things have been going well thus far. But I've got bad news for you. Your boss comes in the next day, and they make a request that you'll find difficult to meet, okay? Because your boss requests the ice snake. And you don't know it yet, but your life will never be the same. The ice snake. What do we do with the ice snake? Where do we put it in this inheritance hierarchy? Well, I'll start you off with an idea. It's a terrible idea. But hey, we want to get that ice features. We want to get the ice logic. Where's the ice logic? Oh, it's an ice panda, right? So let's inherit from ice panda. What's the problem here? Yeah.
It doesn't share any of the, probably doesn't share any of the functionality of just ice.
Yeah, it's like, well, we got the ice part, which is great, but wait a second. Now there's a bunch of panda logic in our snake. This makes no sense at all. This is awful, okay? Makes no sense, all right? This is going to be a huge problem. Now, another idea is we could create a reptile category, okay? Any of you thought about that? Okay, let's create a reptile category, then we'll create snake and then ice snake. This is perfect, right? No, because we've violated a principle that I think we've already talked about in this course, the principle of dry. If you look in this inheritance hierarchy, you now have ice functionality in multiple places in your inheritance tree. Okay, this is not what you want. A reminder, the dry principle, don't repeat yourself. You want any bit of logic, any functionality in your code base to have one authoritative source, all right? This reduces copy and paste bugs. It improves your ability to maintain your code base. And so you really want to not have copy and paste duplicate data in your inheritance hierarchy if you can get away with it. So that's not a good idea. What about under ice object? Well, we can have an object here, an ice object, an ice snake, but we run into the same problem. We could move ice panda under ice object to reuse the ice logic. But then we would have panda in two places, and we would violate dry in that way, okay? And so, you know, what do we do here? It's just not a good situation. What if the ice panda melts during gameplay? What if we want it to melt? What do we do? Can you change an inheritance hierarchy, like what you're inheriting from mid-gameplay? Like at runtime? Usually not. So inheritance structures are usually a compile time thing. All right? Once you get into running your program, you usually can't just change it willy-nilly. All right? So the situation with this ice snake is that we're just running in circles, okay? We're chasing our tail, and this shouldn't be. An ice snake conceptually is a very easy thing to think about, okay? Why is such a simple game object proving so hard for us to do properly, okay? Well, part of it is this problem. Inheritance hierarchies are kind of fundamentally flawed. They have limitations, okay? Imagine that you are cleaning up your super cluttered desktops that I've seen all of you have, okay? You've got a bunch of photos of boats and cars on your desktop from a recent vacation, and you want to categorize them into some folders. A good idea, okay? And it's going super smoothly until you see this photo. Uh-oh. What do you do with this photo? Who's putting it in the boats category? Who's putting it in the cars category? Okay, cars it is, I guess, but it's also a boat. It can go into the water. During a duck tours tour, you go into the water. It's really, really cool, actually. I did one in Seattle when I was with Facebook. Anyway, right? This is a big problem. There's no obvious category you can put this into, okay? There's no obvious location in the inheritance hierarchy that's going to make this all work out smoothly, okay? What do you do in practice? Well, you just put the photo into one of these folders and hope you can find it later. And if you don't find it in that one folder, check the other one. It's probably there, okay? One thing you might be thinking is, wait, we can solve this issue with the ice snake via multiple inheritance. The idea here is that the snake, the ice snake, is both an ice object and it's a snake. So we should inherit from two things and get the features of both of them, okay? Sounds very reasonable, doesn't it? Well, this feature, multiple inheritance, inheriting from multiple different classes, is banned by a bunch of the world's most popular languages. Okay, C#, Java, PHP, nope, not allowed, all right? And that should immediately raise some red flags. Python does allow it. C++ allows it. But because these languages are banning it, you might ask yourself why. One reason you might ban it is this. Imagine you have this kind of inheritance structure, okay? You have a human that has a sleep function. And, you know, students and instructors are both human, but they have very different sleep patterns. And so they both override and change that sleep function. Now, imagine one day if someone came along who was both an instructor and a student at the same time, which describes me when I was in grad school. I was a master's student, and I was teaching EECS 494 completely by myself, okay? So a question for you, should I use the student's version of the sleep function, or should I use the instructor version of the sleep function? They're both different. And in many languages, there's no way to specify this, and you get a compilation issue, and you just cannot proceed. Sorry, this is invalid. This is called the deadly diamond, and it's a bit easier for this kind of thing to happen than you might think when you start creating multiple inheritance structures, okay? And so the bottom line here is we really need a new approach, okay? Composition is one of our ways forward, okay? Entities are going to be made up of components that provide functionality. This is not an is-a relationship. This is a has-a relationship, okay? And if that's confusing to you, think about it this way. You could say a duck is a bird. A bird is a living entity. But here's another way to describe a duck. If it walks like a duck, if it has fur like a duck, if it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck, okay? Thus, we are describing an object not by what it is in a long hierarchy chain. We're describing an object by the properties and attributes that it has, okay? What makes a duck a duck? Does it need to be in this long hierarchy of classes? Or, hey, it's got a beak, it sounds like it quacks, it walks like a duck, it floats on water. Let's just call it a duck, all right? There are two different philosophies here. One of them is very flexible, the other not nearly as much, okay? And so that's what we get from composition. Here's how composition tends to be structured, okay? Usually you have two different important class types. You have some sort of entity. In Unity, this entity data type is called what? It's called the game object. In Unreal, it's called something different, but it's the same. It's called actor. And here we just call it entity. These data structures are just a container for components. That's all it is, okay? And so, right, in Unity, when you click on a game object, you see in the inspector a big list or a vector, in C++, that's what we call it, of components, okay? And, you know, these entities, you might call your game object a panda or a snake or whatever. Now, each component is also its own data type, okay? These components are guaranteed to have a start, update, destroy function, okay? In Unity, it's called destroy, not cleanup. These are components that you might call, hey, this is your ice component. This is your has health component. This is your renderer component. This is your box collider component, okay? And you take these components and you just jam them into your entity data structure, whatever it's called, game object in our case, and you've got a composition setup, okay? One of the beauties of this approach is what you can see right here. We are not creating an actor or game object. We're not creating a duck. We're creating a property of the duck, okay? This component is a property. It's an adjective that we can pop on, we can just slap it right on to anything that we want. Read this component real quick. It shouldn't be too hard now after you're almost finished with P1. And tell me what this component does. And like always, you can just look at the name and you get a really big hint as to what it does. Okay? Yes?
I think it would just like make the duck like kind of bob up and down.
Yeah, we could actually use this on a duck. Now, I don't use it on a duck, okay? Here's what I use it on. I use this in a platforming, side-scrolling shmup game, okay? Here's what I used it on. I took that sine wave movement component and you put it onto an enemy turret. You now have a flying enemy turret, okay? But guess what? You can take this component and you can just as easily put it onto a platform. You now have a floating platform. I wrote one tiny chunk of code. Now I have enemies working. I've got floating platformers working, right? Composition is an approach that multiplies your effort. You write a tiny chunk of code. Now you can use it in all these different places like it's nothing, okay? And that's what you want to do. That's how you want to build things in Unity, okay? Now to finish up today, and then we'll finish this lecture on Monday. We're going to solve that earlier problem with the panda and the ice snake. Okay, we're going to do it, though, not using inheritance. We're going to do it using the HAZA approach, okay? Composition. What does a panda have? Think to yourself. What kind of components might I create to describe a panda? Yeah. It has some animation, or maybe a render, so we can see it, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, okay? Maybe it has a collider, okay? Here's some I thought of, not exclusive. A panda has fur, okay? And maybe this component will apply a unique shader to the renderer and make it look fuzzy, okay? Sounds good. A panda eats meat, did you know that? And so we can give it the carnivore component. Should we stop there, though? We'll come back to that in just a sec. Is a panda a carnivore? No. but we still give it the carnivore component. And if that's confusing, give me just one moment. A panda is a living being, okay? It has health, it has energy, it has stamina, it has to sleep eventually, okay? It has hygiene, it has hunger, right? And if we want a game object or actor to have any of those things, we need to give it this living component. We can give this living component to the other pandas and the snake if we want it to have those properties as well. What is the living component? It probably is just a big component that has a bunch of floats in it. Probably. Okay? It's like your has health component in Project 1. It has a renderer so we can see it. Now, a panda is not a carnivore, it is an omnivore. It eats vegetation, but it also eats meat, okay? And so we'll give it the herbivore component. If you have both components, that makes you an omnivore, okay? And so we thus have the panda finished, and we have a bunch of components that we might be able to reuse. The ice panda, we will create an ice skin component. It renders the panda's material with this little shimmer and bluish tint. It makes it look icy, okay? For the eldritch panda, we're going to give it a zombie skin, which is very similar to the ice skin component. And we're going to give it the flying component, which spawns in some wings and allows it to hover off the ground, okay? For the ice snake, we're going to use that ice skin component that the panda had up here. We're going to reuse it. We're going to give it a scales component and a poison component, okay? And there we go. Compare that approach, which was pretty straightforward, to the IZA approach, where we were fighting to figure out where we put all this stuff to minimize things like dry, okay? Actually, to maximize dry, all right? Now, a couple questions, right? Where does the ice snake go? We can ask that question. What happens if the ice panda melts? How do we take this ice panda and make it a normal panda at runtime? You know how to do this. Give me the line of code that does this. Yes? Yeah, you can just get component ice skin dot enabled equals false, or use the destroy function to get rid of it completely, okay? How do you make a scaly panda? Well, take the scale component that you have on the ice snake and just put it onto the panda. Get rid of the zombie skin, okay? You've made a scaly panda, okay? Flying zombie snake, again, you take components you already have, you apply them to other objects, and you've got good stuff. As you build more game objects, as you write more components, you end up developing a kind of very deluxe and reusable library, a toolbox of components. Eventually, you can build new things, new game objects, new types of things without writing any code, okay? However, right, and that's really good if you have a technical teammate or non-technical teammates who can't write code. They could still build new things in your project. A question, though, did you notice something bad about this approach? We have a zombie skin component and an ice skin component. What code do they share, right? The skin stuff. We violated dry, didn't we? We violated dry, so we're back to our initial problems with inheritance. But can you think of a way to solve this? Okay, the big plot twist. You can use inheritance to solve this problem, okay? Create a base skin component and derive from it with zombie skin and ice skin, and now you have eliminated dry, okay? The plot twist here is that composition and inheritance are not rivals. They are complementary. They're complements. They are two tools for reusing stuff that are now in your toolbox, okay? So please, use inheritance and use composition when you can. And hopefully, it makes it a little bit more clear now why composition is so powerful in game engines. If you're doing creative work, components are a big deal. They help you move fast and reuse lots of stuff. Now, we're going to talk about how to build your own composition approach in C++. It's not that hard when we come back on Monday, okay? And we'll also be talking about other stuff, for instance, Project 2 on Monday. Because when Monday comes, what is finished? Your Project 1, okay? So you're almost there. The light is at the end of the tunnel. Students in general love when P2 starts, okay? You're going to get a little bit of a break when P1 ends, and yeah, I think you'll enjoy it, okay? Do the best you can on P1, okay? Don't sweat it. Don't lose sleep over it, okay? Just do the best you can, and yeah, I'll see you Monday. See you then. All right, everyone online, take care, and good luck finishing up P1 Gold. Bye-bye.